So we have reached step 8 of the Eightfold Path. There isn't a step 9. So it all comes together with this particular lecture. Now, one of the interesting things of the Eightfold Path is pretty much every step itself, they say, is recursive. They all lead to each other. And in order to really understand 8, it's useful to understand the 7 that preceded it. But in many ways, to get to 8, you had to understand the 7, but while you're doing 8, you're going to understand the other 7 better. They all work with each other, of course, okay? But there's one piece in particular that matters the most, and it's going to be the emphasis of what step 8 is, which is right concentration. And it's really something that comes from right view. And we will emphasize the heck out of it for many different reasons. It's imperative to really get it, to understand it. And what Thich Nhat Hanh says, don't even bother with steps 2 through 8 if you don't understand this one piece in right view. But you'll see how right concentration ultimately answers all of it. Now I'm going to start with one of my probably worst drawings ever. If you can see what this is here, it's a mountain. And it's an explanation of how Buddha himself described what right concentration is, what Samadhi is. And so I've drawn a mountain very badly, but I did it. And you have trees and you have some wildfires up there, and here's you climbing the mountain. And then there's some snakes and there's rocks all over the place, and that was supposed to be a bear. Okay, but it's a scary monster, but it's also on the mountain. And you're having a rough day on this mountain because see how the sun over here is frowning? It's a hot day and it's sweaty and it's a lot of challenges and adversities everywhere. But then you happen upon this lake right in the middle of the mountain. And this lake, it's clear and it's cool and it's safe. And if you get into it, you're at peace. It's very refreshing. And that lake is in the middle of all this chaos. And that lake doesn't have any tributaries, right? Because its own natural spring feeds it. Underneath it, it feeds this lake. And so once you find it, you come upon it, you're like, wow, that's wonderful. When I get in there, the monster can't get me, the bear can't get me, the snakes stay away, whatever. I'm cool, the heat of the sun is now not affecting me, and it's comfortable and it's clear. And it never leaves this mountain. And yet, if you spend all your time on the mountain experiencing everything else, you don't even know that it's there, you wouldn't know that there was a sense of peace always right at hand. It's always there. The Buddha calls this Samadhi, okay? Because inside each one of us, in spite of the chaos, in spite of the monsters and the snakes and the fires and the heat and all of that, deep inside each one of us, there's a calm, cool, refreshing lake. In many ways, I like to describe it over here, I just sometimes call it it. Like the Tao says, it can't be named. It can't be named. Lots of times we call it God. It's also known as the Holy Spirit. Other cultures might call it Brahman or Allah. How about just the source? That works. In New Eyes, I talked about the hard problem of consciousness. It's the root of consciousness. Jesus in one text says that when you die, you will dissolve into your own root. Well, that's what this lake is. It's your origin story, if you will. You can call it whatever the heck you want. Like Shakespeare said, a rose by any of their name will still smell as sweet, right? Well, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. It exists. It exists inside each one of us. And it's imperative that we find it. I sometimes say this is the exact moment, and we're going to do a lot of this today, where Jesus and Buddha intersect. It's really the narrow gate. The only way out of this place, this world that we're in, is to find this lake deep inside yourself. Now, who has this lake? Everyone. Who's aware of this? Not many. And we're often looking for this stuff, Tao and the God and the Holy Spirit and all, external to this lake. We're looking for it in the snakes and the trees and, all these external features. But we just went through so many different Buddha teachings, but how we have to learn how to let all that external stuff go. Because the only way you're going to find the answers, the only thing you're going to find that satisfies you is by going deep inside oneself. Where does Jesus say the kingdom of heaven is? It's inside you, right? And so that lake exists on this messy mountain, even if the sun is frowning upon you, right? It's challenging, but it's always there. It can't go away. Everyone has it, and we're all unified in this, okay? So Samadhi itself, that word, which is about finding that lake and learning how to stay there, Samadhi itself has a root of the word Samadhi, which is sama in Sanskrit, which essentially means same. The word same and the word sama fit into Samadhi. And that sameness is hugely important, okay? In order to maintain that lake inside yourself, you're going to have to see sameness all around you, okay? And I'm going to refer back to what we said way back in the first the first step, which was right view. When Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist master, said that don't even bother with steps 2 through 8 unless you understand this concept. And he described it like using a match. And before a match strikes the striker, there's a potential flame there. He calls it unmanifest. And so there's a potential flame, unmanifest, and then you strike the match on the striker, and then there's a flame there. That's called manifest. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, they're the same thing, even though they're different things. And if you can't embrace unmanifest and manifest are the same but different, then don't bother with the rest of the steps. Now, I'm added a couple variations. He gave some too, but a couple that can help illustrate this. Again, your 10-year-old self, was that you? Yes, but are you different than that? Yes. So is your 10-year-old self you or not you? Is it different but the same at the same time? Yes. Is an acorn eventually going to be an oak tree? Yes. But are acorns and oak trees different? Yes. Same but different, right? A super important concept. Einstein, E equals mc squared. He literally said different manifestations of the same thing. Energy, which is really spirit, and M, which is mass, the physical form, Einstein said different manifestations of the same thing. We see this all the time with H2O, water and ice. Are they the same or are they different? Are they different? It's all H2O, but it's different manifestations of the same thing, right? I mean, the examples are all over the place. In order to get to where you want to go with Samadhi, it's to embrace that things can be different and the same at the same time. And it's really the essence of the yin-yang. The idea that there's a little bit of one in the other, and it's all one thing even though it appears to be two, that's important. Chinese philosophy, esho funi, two but not two. And so to get deep into Samadhi and to end, this is the end stage of the Eightfold Path, is to embrace the fact that things are different and yet they're the same. Okay? So, Sama, again, talked about this in the last week or two. Sama Samadhi is the word that was used that we say right speech, right action, right livelihood. In the Buddhist teaching, it's Sama. And Sama, another meaning of Sama is at the service of. And Sama Samadhi is at the service of something specific. And it's not just clearing one's mind so one can have a better ego experience. That's not it. It's much deeper than that. It's also at the service of helping others do it. And it's not for one's just personal gain. It's for the whole world. It's for everyone equally. Sama Samadhi is at the service of right view. And what's the right view? It's not limited to just my 10-year-old self and my current self are the same but different. It's that, I drew here me with a football because it's easy to draw. Buddha called it objects of senses or sensory objects. It's the same as me. Even though a football is definitely different than I am, it's still the same as me because it's an object of perception. And if you remember the physics, superposition and the observer effect, that football doesn't even exist until I interact with it, just like Einstein said with the moon. The moon doesn't exist unless someone's there to interact with it. Einstein considered that question based upon the physics. And so it's quite literally true that while that football is definitely different than I am, it exists directly linked to me because of my sensation of it, right? So that's same but different. But then here's the big one, other people, which we see so much as different, especially in this current culture and where we're at. On all sides of this equation, you're different than me and here's why. And here's how I'm better than you, and here's how my political philosophy is better than yours, and why my religion is better than yours, and why my football team is better than yours. Or vice versa, I'm inferior to you for all these reasons, because you have more money or more likes on Instagram or whatever. Okay? Well, guess what? Same but different. Now, while clearly people are different, thank goodness there's diversity, it would be boring otherwise, the challenge of a person who's working on Samadhi is still to see the sameness of it. It's a type of concentration at the service of right view. The thing that Thich Nhat Hanh said, don't even bother moving forward unless you can embrace that concept. And if you're willing to say, all right, because this swings right into right intention, if you're willing to say, I'm not going to just do this for myself, I want to do this for everyone. And that's super important because guess what? You are everyone. It is different and yet the same at the same time, okay? So Samadhi is ultimately a type of concentration. It's an absorption in which you become one with the object of perception. It's a complete unity thing. It's absorption. Or, as Chevy Chase said in Caddyshack, be the ball, Danny. Quite literally, if someone is playing golf and they are visualizing a connection with the ball, I just got done saying that with the football, right? Can you be the ball, like Chevy Chase was trying to say to Danny? Now, if you remember the scene, Danny's blindfolded. He proceeds to hit the ball in the lake. And Chevy Chase says to him, you weren't the ball. Okay, that's the problem. But in order to succeed at this, you literally have to see everything in your life as an extension of you and love it as you. That's not just things you like, though. Like if it's a nice birthday cake or something, you know, hey, that's me. How about the adversities too? How about the negative stuff? How about our sicknesses and our addictions? And when things don't go our way politically, are we willing to say that that is me as well? What is God's name? I am that I am, right? The person that gets it, who experiences the depths of what Samadhi is, embraces all of it as the same thing. Why? Because it all comes from the same source. It is that lake. All of it comes from that. And so the absorption aspect is really simple. If you're swimming in water, can you separate yourself from the water? Or you're part of the water, aren't you? It supports you, in fact, while you're swimming. You're part of it, and you're in it. Then you could get out of the water and say, well, now I'm separate from that pool or whatever. But while you're in it, you're in it. Guess what? We're in a pool of spirit, okay? This whole world is filled with it. We're all it. We're all interconnected. We're all entangled. You can't separate yourself from it. And yet, as Course in Miracles would say, all of our problems come from our idea of our separation from God, this source, right? The reason why we feel the way we feel is because we think stuff isn't happening the way that it should. And yet, like we did last week with right focus, if you could just sit back and realize you're watching a movie, that when you realize that, you have that recognition, the Buddha said that recognition and liberation are simultaneous. Once you realize you're watching a movie, you're going to have different thoughts. You're going to have a different intention. You're going to have a different energy. Everything's going to shift. The movie will shift right before your eyes. But if you sit in judgment of others, including yourself, you're going to have a different type of energy, a resistance energy. It's not going to be high frequency energy, that's for sure. And you're going to have another kind of movie. That's the science of superposition too. Who gets to determine what movie you watch? You do. Each one of us gets to make that decision based upon the level of unity that we're seeking to be in every aspect. You don't just get to decide, well, I like to feel unified with this group of people, but not that group. Or this circumstance I can handle, but not that one. Nope, must love it all. It's same everywhere you go. And it's unwavering. It's always there. That's total absorption. Be the universe, Danny, okay? Be the other person. Walk in their shoes, metaphorically speaking. Love another as oneself, okay? That's Matthew 22:39. Specifically what Jesus is saying. Quite the end of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Jesus says to love a neighbor as yourself. What does he say right before that? Okay? Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. This is one thing. It's just the lake. It's this lake. And love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. These are great commandments, as he says. These are great strategy. There's nothing else that you have to do after that. If you embrace it all and you trust it all and you love it all, and then you see the other as your equal, no matter who it is, once you do it, now you can experience Samadhi. And so that leads to a story, I like to say. It comes from Hinduism. Remember, it's all one. All things work together for good for those who love God, right? So Hinduism is part of that, also in the lake. And there's a wonderful story that I came across that teaches what right concentration is pretty well. And it's a story of an archery teacher who's working with 3 students. One of them happens to be Arjuna from the Bhagavad Gita. But he has 3 students, and he says to the students, I want to teach you how to be really focused and have great concentration. And so he takes a wooden bird and he sets it across the field in a tree. And he tells each archer, I want you to hit the bird in the eye with an arrow. And so he says, if you're ready to shoot, I'm going to tell you can shoot. If not, I'm going to tell you to sit down. So he asks the first student, and he says to the student, what do you see? You know, look at the field. What do you see? And the student thinks he's smart because he can see so much. He goes, oh, I see a whole field. And then I see the deer in the background. And then there's some squirrel up front, right? And I could tell that it's an oak tree. And at that point, the teacher says, just sit down. You're not ready. The next student thinks he's a little smart, and he goes, okay, I understand. I see the bird, right? And it's on that 3rd branch, right? And I'm looking, it's far out, it's like 3/4. Sit down. Arjuna then steps up. And then the teacher says, what do you see? And he says, I see the eye of the bird. What else do you see? I just see the eye of the bird. The teacher says, you can shoot now. And Arjuna hits the eye of the bird. That's right concentration. What else are you looking for? There's nothing else to look for but this lake. Samadhi is the experience of God within. That's it. Any word you want to use is fine right here, okay? You have it. Everyone has it. That's Samadhi. Anchor yourself in it. It's always there. It's going to be refreshing. It's also going to be the thing that tells you what your best behavior is. You know, it's going to clear addictions. It'll clear mental health. It'll give you the right speech at all times. Luke 12:12 says the Holy Spirit will tell you the words in that moment, what you need to say. Well, that's that lake. Why are you shooting at anything else? Why are you noticing anything else? Don't be telling me about the background, okay? Look at the bird's eye and hit the bird in the eye. That's it. That's right Samadhi. That's right concentration. Be the lake, one with the lake. Absorb yourself with the lake. The Holy Spirit is real. Again, whatever word you want to use. Buddha nature, okay? The Buddha said, you're Buddha too. Why would you distract yourself with anything else? Now, first and foremost, go get that experience. Then you connect with that experience. And notice how the 4 jhanas of this experience means there's different levels. I read one of the teachers talking about how you can have a glimpse of it, and you'll never forget it, okay? That glimpse of it tells you, oh, there was something about that lake, something special, and it makes you want to go back. It's really an addiction. This is the heart I've drawn so many times in Kabbalah, the teaching of the point in the heart, the one addiction, the one desire that will work. It's that lake, okay? Every other addiction you have will eventually disappoint you to all things physical. But that one's going to work, okay? And yet, you can just have a glimpse of it. This one guy called them flickering lights. I love it. The various levels of these jhanas, you can have an experience of it, but it's not there very often. And yet it's frustrating. I love the story of Siddhartha, who on his journey was a little frustrated that he couldn't quite get it because his lights were flickering. Our minds are stubborn, aren't they? They're stubborn on the physical world. The ego itself is constantly trying to tell you, no, none of this is true. Oh, you're so not Jesus. You're not Buddha, right? Or you're not the Christ. You can't do this. You should feel bad about what you did, and you should judge that guy for what he did, right? Isn't the mind always saying that? No. The way to feel better is to gather more materials. That'll make you feel good, Elvis. It just doesn't work, does it? Okay? And if you haven't figured that out by now, okay, eventually you will. Each one of us knows this is true. It's in our DNA. But then you get to a point, because you don't want the lights to flicker anymore, like Siddhartha. He said, I'm going to stay focused. And as the story goes, Siddhartha, who was close to experiencing this lake, he clearly had a glimpse and some flickers. He said, I'm not moving. I'm going to sit right here under the Bodhi tree until I get it. Metaphor, okay? I doubt he sat there 7 weeks without moving. He probably had to go to the bathroom a few times, okay? But the point is he stayed focused. That's step 6 or 7 of the Eightfold Path. He stayed focused. He maintained mindfulness for 7 weeks. He was close. And in 7 weeks, I say that's pretty optimistic. What if you could stay focused on this lake for the next 7 weeks? What if you don't let anything else distract you? What if every person you saw and every experience you had, you perceived as God, right? And you just did that 24/7 for the next 7 weeks. Well, you'd be swimming in that lake. Problem is, we get distracted fast and quickly, right? And I'll do so probably by the time this video is over, okay? But that's the flickering light. Well, Buddha says, I'm not moving until I get there, okay? And then he got there because he stayed focused, and then right concentration was the end stage. And he found himself, all the truth comes to him, like it did with Muhammad too, by revelation automatically. You don't have to go seeking wisdom. It comes to you. It comes with great clarity. And now you know what all the truths are, including everyone has access to this, okay? And so Buddha got there, but then he recognized, guess what? There's still different levels to this, which I think is very nice of him, because it seems and it can be very difficult to understand what 4 is and to stay there. But it starts this first level of the first jhana. It's a type of concentration that still includes thinking. And if I've intersected with this anywhere, I'm usually there. Because with thinking, they also call it rapture, but I like to say it's enthusiasm, okay? The rapture itself comes with great energy and great certain excitement. And it's like if you're at a gymnasium and they turn the lights on at once, big bright lights, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, something's happening here. You can intersect with that and you have this sort of awareness that, wow, there's this great truth going on, but you're still thinking. The mind's going blah, 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 blah the whole time. but you're orienting those thoughts towards these truths. You're still going, what was that first noble truth? What's the second one? How does this connect to Jesus? Stuff like that. You're still going to be thinking. But with that thinking comes a certain enthusiasm and a freedom from the 5 hindrances, which we talked about last week. And what are some of those hindrances? The ones I like to focus on the most are resentments, right? Ill will, doubt, and shame. Also sloth, meaning don't be lazy with this. It takes work, like thou verse 41. The diligent scholar or the superior scholar who hears of this begins diligent practice. The inferior scholar roars with ridicule, okay? The middling scholar does a little bit of it. But if you believe this to be true and it strikes a fire inside of you, the diligent scholar, the superior scholar, diligently works towards this. And so that means you got to get rid of the 5 hindrances. It does mean no resentments at all. No resentments. You don't get to hold a little bit of grudge against anybody. You got to forgive them all as part of your treatment plan. Okay, the universe unfolded just as it's needed to, and you're also right where you need to be. But also don't sell yourself short. Buddha said you're Buddha too. Jesus said you're the light as well. Okay, Jesus even said greater works than these you can do. Jesus put you on his level or even higher. The ego says, nah, they don't really mean that. Well, hey, don't follow their teachings then. But if the Buddha, one of his first insights was you're also Buddha, guess what? You don't have to have any doubt. I've learned from a mental health perspective that this is just great therapy. I didn't plan on getting into this stuff. I just noticed the more people learn how to let go of things, the better they felt. And then lo and behold, we've got these great teachers of detachment. And the idea that this little light is inside of everybody, it was great therapy. And so you don't have to have any doubt or even shame, because shame will hold you back too. Because when we have shame or guilt, we're acting as if we did something wrong intentionally, like we knew this. How many people ever did anything wrong, like whatever you think something wrong is, who was thinking about, that's going to help me get into that lake. Maybe I should use this drug or steal this, item, or, be mean to that person or whatever. No, none of that helps you get in the lake. But you didn't also know that. People think we're here physically having all these experiences and we're trying to gather materials and things like that. But the truth is, if you knew that's what you're supposed to be doing, you'd drop those hindrances fast, okay? And so that first jhana is a level of lots of thinking, lots of talking, lots of enthusiasm, rapture, but you're free to those hindrances. And so you do feel really good, because now you don't have these restrictions, things that were holding you back in the past. But that's only one of 4. The next one, guess what? You don't need to think anymore. Most of the rest of it is the same, okay? It comes with enthusiasm and delight, but you're no longer needing to think. And we've all experienced this when it comes to something simple called our language. Nobody walks in here thinking, I'm gonna think in English. I'm gonna speak in English. Why not? How many times have you practiced it? Aren't you absorbed in English by now? Right? Just like we often are our labels and our identities and things like that. We absorb ourselves in something like that, so that way of speaking is easy. Well, if you absorb yourself in the concepts in the Eightfold Path, and you do it a lot, you don't need to think about it anymore. It's automatic. You immediately see someone else as a Buddha. It's not like, wait, what am I supposed to think of them as? No, you go, Buddha, 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 right? And that doesn't require thinking. The Buddha says it's a distanceless journey from the head to the heart. First learn the teachings, let them sink into your heart. Then like a mirror, the universe will show you that they're true. It's a reflection back, so that your heart, which is now leading with this, we're all one? That's actually true? And I can now love my enemy? Don't have to vote for him, but you do have to love him. That's actually true. You get affirmed. You don't need to think that way anymore. What is that teaching again? No. It's now automatic, okay? It's reflexive. And so no thinking. And this is the deep teachings of things like Muhammad saying, strike at the neck. And it's not talking about anything physical. No one needs to cut off anyone else's head. It's literally, you don't need to think anymore. It's not required. You've already done enough thinking. I've called the head and the mind, I've often called it the traffic cop. It tells you where to go. And where it tells you to go is in your heart, where you're going to find this lake, okay? And so all the great teachings are stop thinking so much. And we know what happens when we overthink, right? We end up with mental health issues, okay? But you get to a point in this process where thinking doesn't happen. Now, that doesn't mean you don't think like, where's my car keys or what time is the game? Of course you do that kind of stuff. But once you're deep into samadhi, especially if you're having a meditative experience or anything along those lines, thinking isn't present. It's automatic. Now the spirit or the Tao is fueling you, and it's going to tell you what to say. Who needs to think if the Tao is speaking for you, right? There's still enthusiasm there, but it's a delightful feeling. Now, deeper, no thinking, but also no enthusiasm. Now again, these are my words. There's plenty of different ways to look at jhanas, but the Kalama Sutta and all that, this is my experience of this, and this is how I understood it, and how I apply this to my life. The deeper I get, which I'm not very deep, but when I get closer to this, I can stop this ridiculous over-talking, over-enthusiasm, that's too much. It comes off as a little manic sometimes. But that's because here you're deeply patient. You can sit back and wait for things to grow. I just feel myself calming down just saying that, right? The truth is there's need not be any hurry. All of eternity is at our hand. This is eternal mountain. You don't have to pressure anyone. Jesus himself was crucified by people who didn't get it. Do you think he was yapping at them saying, you guys, you got to hurry this up? No, he knew his job was singular. His job was to reach the end of this. And you'll see he did. He even had a saying for the end of it, okay? His job was to love another as oneself, as he taught, even those who were killing him. Now, that's not something I tell you to do if someone's killing you, of course. That's not the same sort of teaching. It's metaphorical in many ways. Your ego's going to get killed by tons of different people, that's for sure. And you still love them in the process, that's for sure. That you can do. Jesus mastered that process, took it into the flesh, okay? It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You do it the way it feels right to you. So for me, when I don't think, it's automatic, but I don't have to be the type of rapture they say. That's because you've now settled in. After the lights go on and after a minute or two the game starts, you forget the lights are even there. You get deep enough into this, that enthusiasm, because you've experienced it a lot, it starts to wane. But that's not bad. That's because it leads to a deeper sense of peace. You now don't have to feel like it's your job to hurry up and teach the world or anything like that. You settle into this wonderful sense of it's all good. You don't have to have any enthusiasm, but that's not a negative thing, of course. It's just deeper peace, which leads us to the fourth jhana, and then that's the end of the Eightfold Path here. It starts with this idea of one-pointedness, which is singular focus. And it's your ability to understand that there is this thing which is unnameable. You could call it God or the Tao or whatever works for you. Focus on it. Focus on it so much you become one with it. And then you live your life from that spot. That's the one-pointedness. What did Master Consciousness Teacher Jesus say about that in Matthew 6:22, King James Version? If your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. That's single-pointedness. He's saying the same thing. If you practice loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, loving another as oneself, you're doing the Eightfold Path, right? It's trusting all of it. And it's recognizing that you want others to share in this with you. That's single-pointedness. That's Matthew 6:22. With that comes profound clarity. Now it just all makes sense effortlessly. You get everyone's right where they need to be. Life is very difficult. There's a whole lot of bad stuff going on, but don't eat off that tree. Because eventually, given enough time, everybody figures that out. And that is profound clarity. It also gives you that deep sense of peace and patience. What is the first description of love in Corinthians? Love is patient. And now, at the fourth jhana, you can have that type of patience. The type of enthusiasm you had a little bit earlier isn't necessary. And you can sit back and just allow things to unfold. As you're doing that, it leads to this thing called equanimity. And this is the end. This is really the end of the way the Buddha taught all of it. The equanimity, the way I experience and understand it, is this emotional peace that is so deep that nothing will ever throw you off of it. It doesn't matter if your team wins or loses, okay, or if someone lives or dies. Not in the way we normally think of that. Why? Because it's all the same. There is no death, not like we think. There's transferring, there's impermanence like the Buddha taught. But we don't have to freak out about life and death like we often do. Equanimity is understanding, all part of a greater process, all right? Flowers are planted, and then they grow, and then they die, then they return to the earth, and then the cycle continues. Well, we're part of that cycle. We're part of nature, at least the physical part for sure. The spiritual part, once it understands it, it doesn't have to fluctuate. Now it's swimming in the lake all the time, but it realizes that it's all lake. This whole world is lake. You can't not be in this lake. The only thing that kept us from that is the ego, which is saying, nah, you're different. That's its job. That's what gives us duality. Otherwise, why are we coming here, okay? We could just stayed in the other place, whatever that means. But we came here to experience this exact thing. It's a glorified hide and seek game. And when you came here, you took on a costume. You are that costume. You are ultimately the higher self. I have it over there. You're the higher self as your lower self right now, same but different. It's also known as born again. You think you're this physical being, but you're actually the spiritual being while you're the physical being. So what are you? Well, you're both of them, of course. Even though they're different, it's still same, okay? So I mentioned the flickering lights. You're going to come and go with this stuff, and it's not easy to stay focused. It's why the Buddha was frustrated, okay? It's hard to do that, but if you continue seeking, you'll find you'll get there, okay? And there's plenty of practices, and if you do it in a group of people, it becomes easier. Hello, Sangha. And to get there is to want to stay there. Because why would you want to step out of this? And notice there's many layers to all of this. Eightfold Path, 4 layers, 4 jhanas, and all of that. Okay, so there's a lot to it. Now, one way, it's one of my favorite ways to think of it, is to cultivate this. If you know what this is, if you felt some of this, is the metta prayer, which is so simple, is to always wish others be well and happy. It's so simple. It's right intention, wrapped into all of this. How would others ever be happy and well if they didn't learn that there was a lake inside of them? You can't fix people's problems with money. You can try. There's nothing wrong with that. We're allowed to be generous that way. Plenty of Jesus teachings on how we do charity wrong. The ultimate goal is to learn how to teach people how to recognize that the God is within, or that the Buddha nature is within. That's the ultimate liberation. And if you have the metta prayer, because that's what you want for other people, because other people are you. Once you do that, that's how you cultivate it for yourself at the same time. It's teamwork. Now, all this ties up into a nice little bow for what I was just saying. The idea, again, a lot of people don't know that the word Buddha means to wake up. Well, wake up from what? We're having a dream of this mountain, okay? Dreams are real, okay? They exist, that we just call them illusions because they have a deceptive appearance. When you go to sleep at night and have a dream, it seems very real. Is it though? Well, of course it's real, but it's not the ultimate reality because you're still laying in bed having that dream. And you could say the person laying in bed having the dream is the higher self. The lower self is having a dream. Isn't absolutely everything included in that dream part of the person who's laying in bed having it? 100%. Everything that happens in a nightmare or a good dream, whatever, it's all part of the higher self in bed having that dream. Well, we're right now having that exact same sort of experience. We're in a dreamlike state. It exists. It's not real. It's just a deceptive appearance. It's an illusion. Every prophet mentions the illusion one way or another, and Einstein himself called it an illusion. Now, when you believe that this is the real state and you call it reality and you think it's the only state, that's why we have the suffering. And it becomes recursive. It goes back to right view again. The fact that we cling to this place as the primary place is what causes our suffering. You want to have a wonderful experience? Break free from that. Walk the Eightfold Path. Help others do it. Then we're going to have a nice, much better dream, okay? But to think of it in the right way, Buddha means to wake up because we're in a dream state. You do have a higher self that's dreaming you right now. Now, just like your nighttime dream, it's different, but it's the same. Your higher self is right here, right now. Anyone watching this or anyone in this room right now, your higher self is right here. You couldn't ever separate it from it. There's nothing you need to do. You just have to realize it. There's no behavior you have to perform to impress a God. That's why both Buddha and Jesus talked about the precepts. No commandments. No laws like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, which is good advice. Those precepts are good advice. But for some reason, people kill and steal. Why are they doing that? Because they haven't found the lake yet. If you find the lake, you're not feeling like killing anybody else. This is why Jesus says, don't bother telling people not to kill and not to do drugs and stuff like that. It's not effective. What's effective is helping people find the God within. That's effective. And so he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love another as oneself. Who kills people after doing that? That's why that's the commandment. That's what he said. That's what you got to do. And that's the Eightfold Path. And then you know that your higher self is your lower self. Your lower self is your higher self. It's the same thing. It's just in a different form. which leads us to the next series we're going to do. I'm going to take a few weeks and we're going to talk about some other stuff, but I'm going to then get into hermetics and the 7 laws of hermetics and the different ways to help understand all of this, just from a different angle, different philosophy. But it's a pretty proactive philosophy in terms of how to help others do it too. It'll follow up this pretty nicely. But the concept in hermetics, which includes as above, so below, is the perfect metaphor to wrap all this up. As above, so below basically describes the idea that what is above us is similar to what is below us. In this dream state we're in right now, there's something similar going on in the above state, just like it does in the below state. And the key to that is, guess what? It's the same thing. Even though we think above and below are different, the key to that, to really get good at that, is to recognize that it's the same thing. And that's what we're going to be doing the next series. So thank you for joining us with these first 8 for the Eightfold Path. Practice it. Again, I do this as a therapist, not because I'm a Buddhist expert. I like to show this to people. If they're interested, go research it yourself. There's tons of other teachings. When I was reading up on the jhanas, tons of Buddhists argue about the jhanas, okay? No, it means this, no, it means that. I'm like, that sounds like Christianity, all right? Catholics and Protestants and all the variations, like, what did Jesus mean by this or whatever? It's okay to have a differing opinion. It's totally okay, right? But if you're intrigued, go research it yourself, come up with other aspects of it, live it. The truth will be the proof that it works. That's the key. That's when you find that lake inside yourself.